I realized, having never worked in corporate, even an admin job, I had none of the qualifications or they either ask you for 5 years of experience or and I had none of it. So I thought, okay, I'm clearly not meant to work for somebody else. So I decided to jump all in. Like felt like I had my back against the wall.
Hello there, Business as Poetry listener. Today's guest knows what it means to have the life you build stop working overnight, all at once. When COVID hit, Krystal Hille lost her events business overnight. Then her marriage ended, and she was a single parent rebuilding from scratch with no clear path forward. What she found in that space, though, was a publishing training, a gut feeling she couldn't ignore, and eventually Hille House Publishing, a company that has since helped over 300 purpose-led entrepreneurs from 26 countries become published authors. Originally from Germany and now based in Australia, Krystal is the living proof that the thing that saves you often arrives in the most unlikely form. Welcome, Krystal. How are you?
I'm so good. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. That was wonderful.
Well, I hope I caught the essence of how you got to where you are today. And I must admit that actually our previous guest, and this is for our dear listeners, this is exactly how a building network and introductions work. But Mariana Sommerfeld, who was on one of the previous episodes, is one of those entrepreneurs who got in touch with you, and she published her chapter in one of your books. So we'll get to that in a second. But I just love what she did so much that I asked her, you do need to introduce me to Krystal, because as you know, I love reading. I love writing. Publishing is probably not something that I've done before, but I'm sure I will at some point. That's the dream, to have a book. And I think there are probably many of our listeners out there who are equally curious about the publishing business, but also how you ended up there, because you didn't always know that you wanted to be a publisher, did you?
I never knew I wanted to be a publisher. It was just a complete surprise. And when I look at my life, I feel like I'm guided by values and a vision. And that's what really kind of pieces all of these different careers that I've had together. And, I admire people who are in a career for 25 years and they're still really passionate about it and they've mastered it and they've become a real expert. For me, it feels like I reinvent myself every 5 to 10 years and then I start from scratch, because it almost feels like my soul wants to experience like 3 or 4 lifetimes in one. So I started off, actually, it's fascinating, right? The way it works. I have a English literature and theater degree, which I didn't use I used the theater because my first career was in London, where you are, as a theater director. And at the time, I really wasn't clear on my values or what it is. But looking back now, I realized it was all about empowering actors to be the best they can be on stage. So bringing the best out of people. And I feel that is a theme that's carried through all of the things that I've done. Because when that door closed in 2005, 2006, and I was guided to come to Australia, I found life coaching. And again, this is all about bringing the best out of people, empowering people. At the time, I really didn't. And, speaking about how do we find our career? How do we find our business? I'd always known, like, this deep inner knowing, I'm here to help people. But as a teenager, I didn't quite know what that meant. I thought it was psychology, but that didn't really resonate. And so then in my 30s, when I found life coaching, I thought, that's it. That's how I help people, right? I just needed to have my L plates on, my learning plates to learn how to be a leader and how to deal with people and how to bring the best out of people. And I did that in a playful way as a director. And then, as you already said, as part of my life coaching, I ran events and all of that shut down. And then I was at another crossroad. And that's when, it was really unintentional. I was actually very surprised when it all resonated. It's like, okay, this is what you need to do. You need to help people publish their books. And now I'm realizing retrospectively, again, I'm bringing the best out of people. I'm helping people make sense of their lives in many respects, make sense of their stories, find that find that common theme that we all have one or two or three sort of themes that are interconnected that take us through our life, just like I've shared with you just then. Yeah, so that's what I help my authors find, especially in these multi-author books. And so it's really, really beautiful to see them realizing how puzzle pieces fit together that they hadn't previously seen how they fit together.
Yeah, so I think you're definitely on the right show because we're certainly not interested. Well, we've had a few exceptions, but generally we don't talk so much about people who've, luckily for them, have found their calling from day one and they've stuck with that thing, which is beautiful. But unfortunately, I think that doesn't. It's not how it works for most of us, and that's a very small percentage, at least of the population that I've gotten to know over the years, and certainly it's not too dissimilar from the way my career has been and the way it keeps evolving. But I wanted to go back to perhaps the theatre days. What was that like? What did you take from that? Because there was again that element of perhaps helping others and guiding them. And is there something that is still that you still going back to from those days, even if it was just the first baby steps towards finding your true calling?
Yeah, it's actually interesting. Some of the theater exercises that I did with my actors then have featured in my book on writing because it's about the embodiment of who we are. And sometimes, embodying that through different exercises. There was exercises about the four elements and embodying the four elements physically that then helps us to kind of understand them or be able to express them more emotionally and mentally because I have a quiz and it's all about which author archetype are you and now which thought leader archetype are you, which is based around the four elements. So I'm connecting those pieces from then. But the other thing is that I really learned how to see a person as who they are as an individual and see how to motivate them to fully express themselves in a character.
Yes.
So it's and the feedback I get now from the people in these multi-author books, they're saying it feels like I'm the only person in the room and you're speaking directly to me. Because I don't know, it's like something, it's like one of those intangible skills, right, that you pick up or fine tune and hone in on in working with people.
And what brought you all the way from Germany to, and as you mentioned, in London and then Australia? I mean, it's a long way to go. Was that for personal reasons? Was that for work, or a little bit of both?
Uh, Definitely, it wasn't work. I was in London. I was in debt. I was paying a mortgage that was way too expensive for me. And I had gone through my first divorce and I was looking at, well, what's keeping me here? My career actually kind of felt like it was put on hold. Nothing that I had done previously that got me jobs and results worked anymore. And I was, at the time already very intuitive. I'm like, okay, what's going on here? There's just like everything I do, I just get a block. There's a block here. So maybe I'm not meant to be doing this anymore. Maybe I'm not meant to be here anymore. But what? Where am I supposed to be? What I'm supposed to do? And there was no close friends that were holding me there either. So I put out the question to the universe, and the answers came in terms of synchronicities. So suddenly, a lot of my friends were going on a 3-month visa to Australia. And then I ended up temping for an Australian company. And it was just Australia was suddenly everywhere. And I was like, okay, maybe I'm meant to buy a ticket to Australia and just go here. Because my criteria to the universe were very clear. I'm not going back to Germany and I'm not learning another language. So show me.
Okay.
So
Well, that was
I
some
just did.
filters you had there, but I do believe in synchronicities, and I was just telling you before this call that we had a few events last week to celebrate the spring arriving here in the northern hemisphere, and it was there were a lot of synchronicities that number one led to it, and then also things that came up, and there was this lady in the group. I really want to share this because I was going to say, I think you're wearing a little pearl here, and that was exactly the symbol that kept coming up for me because I was seeing pearls everywhere, and I was gifted pearls, and people were when we did a little meditation. One of the ladies said, "That's what I saw." And I was like, "Oh, I wonder what that's going to lead us." So it's not as obvious because I haven't asked a similar question. I don't know what that has to do, but I definitely want to explore more. But I love that you just followed your gut by the sounds of it, a little bit of intuition, packed your
I
bags,
did.
and off you went to Australia.
Yeah, I did. And then there was even a dream because I was still doubting it and questioning it. I wanted to have the guarantees. And then I had a literal dream
Mm.
where I was flying in a plane and it said, "Welcome to Australia." And in that moment, my alarm went off and I said, okay, I cannot deny this anymore. I'm just going to have to find a way to come here. So I came on a tourist visa. The moment I land, I'm like, okay, this is home. This is where I need to be. This is where my next evolution is going to take place, what my soul needs.
Mm. Well, it sounds like you've had more than one evolutions actually since then, because again, you started with one particular job and then you ended up somewhere in a very different place. And it sounds like it was quite a, again, dramatic change, the universe showing you, so to speak, that there were around 2020, I think everyone was shown that things are changing and that things are about to get interesting and that we do have to get off our backsides and think a little bit deeper about what we're doing and why we're doing it. Interestingly, around that time, that podcast was born, which is all the idea for it anyway. So I think we all went through that. So what happened for you in 2020? And maybe you can give us a little bit of how it all started in Australia and what happened afterwards that really was a turning point for you.
Yes, so with COVID, all of the events, I was running events around conscious connection and female women's empowerment, and of course, all of that shut down. And whilst the government, gave us money, and I could have easily waited it out, but then I also, with COVID, you either had a COVID baby or you had a divorce. That was kind of a running joke, and because you were in such close proximity and couldn't get away from each other. So in my case, it was the divorce, and so I then ended up with a 5 and a 8-year-old as a single mom with an unpredictable partner. So I couldn't plan anything for weekends or rely on him to take the kids when I was. So I couldn't organize or plan anything essentially. So events were out of the question, even with COVID no longer a problem. And it was around that time then that this, as you mentioned earlier, the publisher, there was a publisher, I was in 2 multi-author books, and she said, "I'm training people how to do this." And that's when my whole body resonated. I was like, okay, this is it. Because I was literally going through jobs and looking, well, maybe I can just get a part-time job somewhere just to tie us over. And I realized, having never worked in corporate, even an admin job, I had none of the qualifications or they either ask you for 5 years of experience or da 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 da. And I had none of it. So I was like, okay, I'm clearly not meant to work for somebody else. So I decided to jump all in. Like, I had felt like I had my back against the wall, and this was my time, my lifeline. And so I grabbed it with both hands. I started really quickly, actually. Like, the way the training worked, it was like just basically teaching us as we went. And because I had built a network or a community around female empowerment, and I'd done lots of summits in that capacity, I literally just went to all of those people. So I explored my existing network and asked them if they wanted to be in my first book. And that's how I filled it pretty quickly, really. Everybody seemed to trust me because they'd known me from the past. And I think that's one of the tips I have for, your community. Never underestimate who you already know, even if you're starting something brand
Oh,
new.
yes.
All of those connections are
Oh,
transferable.
yes, and that's how I started a podcast. I was very nervous, and I basically invited every woman that I thought was interesting. Some of them I knew very well. Some of them I just secretly admired. And I still remember how nervous I was before sending those emails, and then nobody actually said no, which was really nice. So as you said, whenever you're not approaching somebody completely cold, it's always, at least that's been my way, just using warm introductions. That has worked for me. So if somebody out there is perhaps listening or trying to do something new, and there's a little bit of doubt and hesitation, don't worry, you will be supported. Perhaps that's the message.
Exactly. Absolutely. It is.
Yes, but I want to dive back a little bit into you mentioned, okay, so we have parts of the story. We know that now you are setting up your publishing business and you've helped people, you've guided people before, you've always been very connected with your body. But certainly, I'm sure that hasn't come without its challenges. So, what was probably the hardest thing to get used to or to find out once you started running that maybe I'll call it a third business, even though there were probably other things in between. But what was the biggest adjustment that you had to make?
With the
Yes, with
publishing,
the publishing compared to all the other things that you had done before. Was it all just kind of smooth sailing and one thing just leading to another?
I think the way to manage
Mm.
people was different. Like I've always managed people in the past, but with a brand new business, where I felt like I was finding my feet and I was fumbling around a little bit. The boundaries of what it is and what it isn't, and where the part contributors have input into the creative process and where they don't. It wasn't, I was still finding my way. And I think it was also at a time where I literally had just come out of the divorce or the relationship, and boundaries weren't my strong suit. Let's just put it that way. I was in this empath narcissistic relationship, and because I had no boundaries, and so it was I think that for me personally, the biggest thing I had to learn is what are the expectations. They're really clearly outlining that, and then really within myself holding boundaries so that they could be felt and respected by those who I work with.
So I'm sure there might be somebody out there who's listening right now and maybe starting to realize that somewhere in their life they might be in a similar relationship, whether that's their partner or somewhere else in the family. So what would you say to them? Where can they start? What you mentioned boundaries, but if there was one thing that they could do today, what would you almost as if you're speaking to your old self, all those years ago?
Yeah, I love that question. I would say that you matter,
Mm.
your needs are important, and what you feel and is valid. So it deserves space. It deserves to be taken seriously, and it's worth not fighting for, because fighting is the wrong word.
Standing up for.
It's worth
Mm.
defending, right? It's worth kind of sitting in that, like, this is how it is. And the other thing a friend of mine told me at the time is no is a complete sentence. There doesn't need to be a justification or anything. No is a complete sentence. And the other one that was really important is like, I'm allowed to change my mind,
Mhm.
especially for recovering people pleasers where we overcommit. It's like, it's okay to change our mind. That doesn't work for me anymore. Or no, that doesn't work.
Yeah, it's funny that you said the people pleaser because again, when we were doing our workshop over the weekend, we were going through archetypes in business. And I love archetypes. I'm a storyteller. I find that archetypes are beautiful for telling stories. And the people pleaser came up a lot as an anti, I suppose, as a shadow to the queen, the sovereign within us. And whatever you may want to call your archetypes, there's usually three or four that we rotate around. But you didn't mention that when you start working with authors, those archetypes come up again, and you would usually explore what theirs are. So, what does that look like? What are the author archetypes? What can you tell us about that so that they can see maybe if people recognize themselves?
Yeah. So author archetypes, let's go. Like I created them around the four elements, as
Hmm.
I said. So we have the watery archetype, and in writing, this expresses itself as somebody who's really intuitive, very in touch with their emotions, and they write like it's stream of consciousness writing onto the page. But oftentimes, instead of having a riverbed where you're containing your thoughts, it just floods, right? So there could be initially in the first draft, there could be oversharing, there could be it just like there's just such a flood of information and emotions that yeah, we need to create a riverbed and an intention and more bringing a little bit of more of the earth in. but the emotional connection is very powerful, and that's the gift that I call it the watery mystic. It's that gift that they have. Um, the earth element, I call it the empress, the earthy empress in those archetypes. She very methodical, very grounded. Everything they say is like in statements, and it makes sense, and it's well structured. The shadow side of that is procrastination, because things need to be perfect, and the earth doesn't move very fast. So it's it's a very slow, and everything is thought through like 5 times before we actually put pen on paper. And like there's an outline that gets written and written again and again and again. But the actual starting of the writing and saying, okay, I'm just going to see what comes out is challenging for them. Um, I always say in writing, don't edit and write at the same time, because it requires two different. The one is a creative, and the other one is logical. And if you do it at the same time, it's like if you're driving a car, having one foot on the pedal on the accelerator and the other one on the brakes, and it just creates so much wasted energy and frustration. So I feel like the grounded, the earth element has a little bit of that. They always want to just make sure that everything is correct from the beginning, which doesn't happen in the creative process. You sometimes just need to let it out. So they need a little bit more water. Then the air element, they call it the wizard, the airy wizard. They have so many ideas, like a million ideas, like the wind, like a leaf in the wind, and they follow one and then they follow the other. But they're also amazing teachers, because their minds are very, very clear and powerful. And they have the ability, when they do organize their thoughts, to simplify really complex ideas and teach them. Their downside is that they can often hide behind their ideas, and they don't bring their personality into the story enough, pretty much similarly to the earth. And then the fire element, as I call it, the charismatic, fiery charismatic. They bring everyone in with their passion. Like they can motivate people. They're charismatic. They're an amazing storyteller. The downside, or their downfall, is that people get swept up in their energy and then get left thinking, oh my God, what was that? It's like, if you have a raging fire kind of just going through a forest, you get left feeling a little depleted, because you were held in the energy of that archetype of the fire. And then you're left with yourself being overwhelmed by all of this amazingness, but it doesn't apply and relate to us. So again, the fiery archetype needs to learn to tease out the lessons in their story, not just tell a story for a story's sake, but share reflections and insights, so that it means something to the listener or to the reader.
Yeah, so it almost sounds like there's a little bit of each of those in all of us, and there's probably one that's driving the wheel, but there are the other ones, and it could lead to dissonance if you're not careful. So it sounds to me like that's where you usually come in, and that's how coaching works. That's when you need the mirror. You need somebody to just not necessarily teach you something, and you're not teaching people how to write, but just to hold that mirror for them and help them get to wherever they're going, and create the I always like to call it the best environment for them to perform in. But maybe you can tell us a bit more about how that process works and where you get involved, especially as I'm sure there will be many of our listeners that come through my Substack circle who are probably dreaming of having a book, but maybe being a self-published author or pitching to a traditional publishing house is not the way for them. So it's good to know that there are alternatives.
Absolutely. So I do several things. So we do the multi-author books, where each author writes one chapter to a particular theme. Currently, we've got Standing in Your Knowing, stories of thought leadership, or stories of stepping into thought leadership. And I think for me, just a little side note, I realized after I'd written my book, I still didn't feel like a thought leader. I still hadn't claimed my knowing and my expertise. And I was just another project I had done. So I realized the importance of, and this is what I work with, is that identity shift that happens when we put our work out there. And it can happen as a podcast host, or it can happen when you're a speaker. It doesn't necessarily need to be through a book, but a book certainly is one of those transitions or initiations when your work is out there published. So yeah, so the multi-author books are one way, and there is a beautiful container where I take people through it. I share, okay, how do you structure a book, a chapter? How do you ensure that you really take the reader on a journey that is transformational for them? And yes, these archetypes and elements definitely fit in. So we talk about that, and then I give feedback on what comes in and which element they may need to dive more into or strip away a little bit. And then I've got also, like, sometimes people come to me saying, Krystal, I have a book idea, but I don't know what to do with it. So we have an initial conversation, a strategy call. I set them off, we create the outline, and then often they go away and say, yeah, I can write it by myself. Other times they want check-ins along the way to keep them accountable. And so the editing almost happens, on the feedback happens as it is written. So that's a one-on-one kind of way of doing it. Sometimes people come with me with a finished manuscript and say, yeah, is this any good? Can you give me some feedback? So I'll do a manuscript assessment on that, and then we'll do the editing, and then we can do it's a publishing service. So I'm not a traditional publisher in that I provide publishing services. So it's a done for you service. So people just give me the manuscript, and together we work out, okay, what do you want your book cover to look like? And I help them all the way to the bestseller campaign,
Do you
basically.
help people pitch to traditional publishers as well? Because I know there are differences, and I'm obviously not very familiar with the publishing business, not having done that myself, but I've heard all sorts of stories around that, and it could be quite a, I should say, difficult world to fit in for many.
Yeah, it is. And I think, like, that's where you need an agent who can help you. I don't actually think they're called agents. There's something like an
Hmm.
agent that will represent you and that will work with you on your book proposal. But that is not an area that I have gone
Hmm.
into. I have looked a lot at the pros and cons of having a traditional
Hmm.
publisher versus not. And unless it is Hay House or one of the bigger ones, I really don't see the value in having a traditional publisher, because the contracts they put you in can be quite restrictive, and you still have to do all the marketing. Like, they only take you on if they think they can make money from your book. So the royalties will be quite low. Yes, you don't have the outgoings initially of getting the book published. That is taken care of most of the time, but then the royalties are very, very small, and you still have to bring the audience.
Mm. Yeah, well, that's always the case whenever you have a business, whenever you're the author, you have to bring the clients, you have to bring the business, and that's how it works. But hopefully here we've given people plenty of examples that it doesn't have to be hard, it doesn't have to be something that you absolutely resent, even if you are very creatively inclined. It is exactly that passion that you should be using in the exact same way to actually bring in the business and the money and the revenue. But I am curious again because I had this interesting conversation with a lady who is she's a careers transformation coach as well, and she actually gifted me her book, which was very kind of her. She said, "Yes, I'm giving them away now because I didn't really make any money, and it was quite expensive, and I don't know if I'll do it again." And maybe that was fine for her and for whatever she was looking to do. But nonetheless, I thought it was actually quite a good book for what it was serving a purpose. So is it worth having a little bit of a discussion around, are people going to make lots of money from publishing, or is there perhaps a different purpose that we often ignore, and we focus a lot on the financials, but we do forget that perhaps there is something even bigger and better that you could get out of telling your story in a written form.
Yes, so most authors don't make money from their books unless, they're the biggest
Mm.
bestsellers out there. What I, it sounds like your friend, client, colleague had her book published
I think
somewhere
she
and
self-published,
printed
and she
somewhere and had
funded it
lots of,
completely herself. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So what I do is I publish it on Amazon or Ingram Spark. So it's a print on
Mhm.
demand where the author doesn't have any expenses as far as the printing of it is concerned. You don't have a garage full of books that you then have to figure out, give
Mm.
away for free.
Which is
If
basically what she was doing.
it's exactly. So I actually, in my very first book, I did that as well. I got it printed in China or somewhere overseas, and then I had, like, lots and lots of boxes. But I feel like Amazon is just so much easier. You can still buy your author copies and then still have like 20, 50 books at the back of a room if you're doing events. And I think this is where the actual purpose of a book comes in. And when I speak to an author who wants to write a solo book, I say, "Look, how are you going to use this book? How is it going to serve your business?" Because it actually becomes a lead magnet. It becomes that thing that shows people I am somebody worth listening to. I have created my framework. I have a methodology. And usually if people don't have one when they come to me, we create it together. So I don't want anybody to be put off as like, I don't have a methodology. You don't have to have one when you start writing a book. It emerges out of the process, which is the beautiful thing. So yeah, but the strategy has to be clear. Okay, what is this book leading into in your business? Are you going to create an online course that is expanding on the ideas of the book or bringing the ideas of the book to life? Um, is it going to be going into a high ticket program? Or are you literally writing it? Like I was working with a lady and her son was incarcerated and she was writing a book about her story, but also to help other mothers of incarcerated children to cope with the system. So for her, she's using it to build a speaking career around this. Say, here's my book. And she goes around now and speaks to different organizations and to educate people. So it's not necessarily going, well, it's kind of some kind of a business as well, but for her it was more of a purpose
Mhm.
work that then led her into a speaking career. Because when you're a speaker, I highly recommend having a book. People take you more seriously.
Yes. Well, it's actually nice because until I met with Mariana, I didn't even know that that existed. There were people like you who could help guide you through that because it's quite an intimidating process, and I think that's where most people would probably give up because they're like, well, I don't even know how it works. It's too expensive, and what's almost what's the point of it all? And it's always it's a lonely. It could be quite a lonely experience as well, being a writer and spending a lot of time on your own. But I was curious, is there I know that you specifically focus perhaps on entrepreneurs who are building spiritual businesses or they work as teachers, coaches, Reiki masters, etc. But is there something that they all have in common? And I wonder if there are perhaps you've noticed the story that most people are usually afraid to tell. Is there something along those lines that you've observed after working with so many accomplished entrepreneurs?
It's a really good question. I feel they all have a yearning to make a bigger contribution. Very often I hear people saying, look, if my story, my wisdom is just helping one person, then it's worth, or is changing one person's life, then it's worth having written it. So there's the people I work with are very contribution focused. They are very mission focused, very purpose driven and heart centered.
Mm. Yes, and I was wondering as you were speaking that you sometimes are well hidden behind the scenes producing these books, but do you feel that you have told the world your story, or is there a story still waiting to be told? And maybe is there something that's on your big heart's desire? And I know that you listen to your body very intuitively, which is wonderful. But is there something that you can sense is coming or is ahead of you that's really giving you the passion to continue?
Yeah, there definitely is. So I've written my business book. I've written a book called The Aligned Author, how to come into momentum and mastery and how to overcome self-sabotage when you're writing a book. So I have written that book, which is like my, flagship. There is a personal book, yes, that is brewing for sure, and it's not time yet. And I think this is sometimes very, very interesting as well to know. We know intuitively whether we are sabotaging ourselves, or sometimes actually people don't always know. Is it self sabotage that I'm feeling not yet? Or is it that I'm still living my story and it's not, I need to get to the next goalpost before I can actually write about it. So I do feel, and I actually was at a book launch the other day of one of my authors locally, which was very beautiful. And there was a lady there, an intuitive lady, and she said, I feel like you're going to go back into couples coaching. And because that's what I was doing pre-COVID, working, in conscious connections and all of that. And I said, yeah, I stopped because I felt totally out of alignment. Um, because I was going through a divorce and being a single woman. So why would anybody
Oh, yes.
listen to me, right? But I feel so once that chapter is complete, I feel like there's another chapter that's waiting for me. And once that is in progress, there may very well be a reflection on all of that wisdom that has, been being created.
And maybe
Yeah.
you needed a bit of capacity to do what you're doing now, because we often say, yes, we have many ideas and we're multifaceted, multi-talented people. But I always remind my coaching clients as well that you do need to let go, maybe pause and put something to the side so that something new can flourish. And usually that's where we come in from the external perspective to help guide people through what can stay and what they want to stay and what's maybe the new thing that needs to come in. You can't be doing everything forever, but I'm sure that something exciting is coming for you. And I'll always say, I think that actually the fact that you had a divorce makes you even better counselor, right? Because you've been through that, you've navigated that, you've gotten the experience, and you've been on both sides. And many people, let's say, like me, who haven't gone through that, can't even understand or relate, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm waiting to have the, healthy relationship, and then I feel like,
I
okay, then
I'm
I
not
can
happy with the
then
second
I
you've got
can
it.
talk.
I don't think you even need that because I mean there's yeah, I think there's a lot this happens a lot for us women, right? I feel like if you were a man, you wouldn't be waiting, you would just be talking and telling the whole world about it. And I think you already have
Yes.
such a deep life experience that just needs to be shared. And yeah, you know what? People go through those things. And I actually know for a fact of quite a few relationship coaches that have gone through divorces and maybe are single right now. And you know what? They still have a very thriving relationship coaching business. So I guess it's not a requirement. So it'll be interesting to see where that takes you. But what would you say? Because we're nearing the end of our
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it all
yeah.
kinda interweaves.
Oh yeah,
So,
absolutely. That's the favorite part of my job in doing these interviews is then actually staying in touch with these beautiful guests that I have and seeing how their careers continue to evolve because we've captured it's almost like a time capsule now. This is Krystal now, but 2 years down the line or even 2 months down the line, who knows what's it's gonna look like. But like, as we're nearing the end of
yeah,
the conversation,
yeah. One more
no, please carry on. We have a couple
there's
more
one more
minutes.
point that I wanted to make, if that's okay, and yes. And that is like, when do we know when is the right time to write a
Hmm.
book, or when is the right time to, start a couples coaching business, whatever. It's really making the time every 3 months or so to tune in. What am I putting off that is quietly knocking on my door? Is it a book that wants to be written? And am I just ignoring it because I'm so busy with life? Or is it not the right time yet because I still have to, complete that, living that chapter? So I think it's really important to regularly reflect and to understand, well, am I making an excuse, or is this an actual
Oh
reason?
yeah, I call it what energy are you operating from? Is this because of fear and procrastination and you just scared to put yourself out there because you might be rejected and someone might say no, or you're worried about what people may think? At least that's been my pattern that I've had to overcome. Or is it because a bit like with the book writing, I know there's a book in me and there's probably a book in most people, but I definitely want to see it. But I'm just not sure. It's not quite yet. I want to make sure that when I write, it's because I have something very important to me that I want to share, not just for the sake of it, so that I have something that I can take photos with. And I know that's how most of your clients feel as well, if not all of them. And the same with I want to have a physical studio where I want to do a lot of the therapies and practices that I do, but not yet. We're not quite there yet, but I know that's coming. So we're all starting with the baby steps. But maybe one final question, which is because I know you're so attuned to your own intuition, your body's wisdom, what's happening in the world energetically. And I think we even scheduled this interview after the equinox because you were quite smart about the energies around it. So what can you tell? Because I know that there are many listeners out there who feel the same way. They're interested in the world from an energetic perspective, perhaps, hence business is poetry and business energetics. What do you make of the world that we're living in and everything that's been going on? And especially because you work with people who guide others through transition, space holders. What advice could you give them?
Yeah, I think it's really important at this time that we embody the state of being that we want to see in the world. So, with everything that's being disclosed at the moment, with the war and the chaos and the collective fear that is being created as a result, I think it's really important for the space holders, for the wisdom keepers to really stay grounded, stay true to the vision that we of the world that we are creating, and understanding that whatever we're going through is a necessary birthing process with contractions and expansions and pain, and we will get through it. And yeah, as I said, it's important to embody that state of being that we want to see in the world.
Always start locally, start with the change you want to see. I feel like I'm almost quoting a Michael Jackson song. Start the mirror with you, starts with you, or something like this. But it is a cliche because it is true, and I say the same thing. I think that now it's not just a question of wanting to do something because you feel like it's almost like your obligation to do that because you're being called at the times when the going gets tough to actually, stand up for what you want to see in the world and be that, be the change.
Yeah, I think we're all being asked to step up and to be the change we want to see. That's another one of those ways of expressing it,
Yeah.
right? Be the change you want to see in the world. But yeah, we're all being asked to step up and step into our future version, step into our highest version
Mm.
so that we can hold and anchor that new grid, that new vibration into the
And I would
world.
probably translate that back to if you're navigating a career change, you're thinking about what's next, you're setting up a business, a side hustle, project, hobby. I mean, now is probably a good time, and you may even look into it a little bit closer. Like, what is speaking in you? A bit like you when you were having your visions. What's the purpose of it? Why is this idea coming to you now? Again, sense into it. Is it time now? Is it something that you want to sit on for a little while? But by all means, don't let fear of expression stop you. And I would say today with whether it's the publishing work that you do, whether it's media and broadcasting and podcasts, we have so many platforms that just weren't available to us before, and it's the beauty of our world, and probably the challenge of our world is that we have so much access to information, but at the same time, it means we have a tremendous opportunity to go out there uncensored without needing a publisher, as you said, without needing an editor, an agent, or whatever, and just speak, right? And trust that the right people will hear it. I think that's what I'm taking from our conversation today. Wonderful.
Yeah,
Wow.
absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely.
that was really the perfect start of my day, and hopefully a nice end to your day in Brisbane in Australia. Thank you so much, Crystal. I will put more information in the show notes, or if you're watching this on YouTube, in the comments below, how you can find more about Crystal, how you can perhaps consider if going for a multi-author book is something that you want to explore, or perhaps you just want some guidance on writing your next project. And then equally, if you are interested in writing, I am launching my new Businesses Poetry Circle. The paid version is going live from April, and we will actually have not just voice notes and transmissions and letters from me as I navigate through all these things that we talked about, but actually we will have once a month a circle as I call it, because I felt that there's a need for sure for people to get together to share, not so much to be coached necessarily, not so much to learn new things, but actually to have a place to rest, to integrate, and to be in that community of like minded authors, entrepreneurs, and individuals. I think, as you say, that's the change that we need in the world. So let's start by being it ourselves. Right. Well, thank you so much, Crystal. It was lovely to
Mhm.
have you. And I can't wait to see what comes out of you and what story is waiting to be told.
Thank you so much.